Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the February meeting of the Housing Opportunity Fund. ASL interpretation is available. Please view and pin Megan Atkins' video to your screen to follow the ASL interpretation. We will start with roll call. Lena Andrews,
Here.
Oliver Beasley, not here.
Here.
Oh,
Yeah,
there
I'm
he
here.
is. Hi, Oliver. Jamel Bay.
Hi.
No Jamel. Joanna Deming. I thought I
Here.
saw her.
Here.
Okay. Knowledge Build Hudson.
Here, peace.
Jerome Jackson.
Here, thank you.
Teresa Kell Smith.
Here.
Mark Masterson. Not here. James Myers. Not here. Paul Spradley.
Here.
Hi, Paul.
Good morning.
Sonia Tillman. I'm pretty sure I saw her. I think she's
Sorry,
here.
I said here.
Oh, okay. Derek Tillman.
Here.
Demonte Walker.
Here.
Adrian Wanahall.
Present.
Kelly Ware Seabrun.
Here.
Megan Winters.
Here.
Let it be known we have a quorum. Review and acceptance of the minutes from January 7th. Has everyone gotten a chance to go over those? If so, can someone make a motion for approval?
Motion to
I
approve.
move.
Teresa Kell Smith, motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
3 seconds.
Derek, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Also, Dr. Bay is here, just for the minutes.
And Jamil is here for the minutes. Does anyone abstain or oppose? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, next we usually do public comment, and we do have 7 or 8 public commenters today, but there are a couple of people that do need to leave the meeting early, and we have a very long agenda. So we're going to go a little bit out of order today, and we're going to start with an annual meeting to talk about the nominations for a chair and vice chair, and then move into a couple of rental gap loans. And then halfway through the meeting, we will do public comment because most of the public commenters are here to speak towards the legal assistance program guidelines, which will then be entertained in the second half of the meeting. So that's the new schedule for today. Are there any questions about that? Okay, so I would like to pass this part of the meeting over to Diamante Walker, who is the chair, should know her last name, who is the chair of the nominating committee. Diamante.
Good morning, and thank you, Jessica. So first, I'd like to thank the Housing Opportunity Fund Advisory Board for allowing me the pleasure of serving as the nominating committee chair. I'd like to thank my fellow nominating committee members who have worked tirelessly to be thoughtful in their deliberations around who should be the inaugural chair and vice chair of this advisory board. And so those nominating committee members are Lena Andrews, Knowledge Build Hudson, Sonia Tillman, and Megan Winters. And so the nominating committee had 2 deliberative sessions to review submissions from candidates interested in serving as chair and or vice chair. At the previous meeting, I did agree to provide a full accounting of all of the nominations, both self-nominees and those nominated by others. And so for the record, that full accounting would be Joanna Deming, who was nominated, I believe, by Jerome Jackson for chair. Derek Tillman, who was self-nominated to serve as chair, and Kelly Ware Seabrun, who nominated herself to serve as chair or vice chair. In response to that, Joanna did notify the nominating committee and the advisory board that she was withdrawing her nomination, and fully endorsed Kelly and Derek to serve as chair or vice chair in the result of her abdication from the nominating process. And so it is with great pleasure that I present to you today the recommendations of the nominating committee. I do want to state that both applicants put forth an outstanding application, and it spoke to their dedication and commitment to the Housing Opportunity Fund. So we are very fortunate to have had such wonderful candidates to evaluate, and we believe that this advisory board will be served by their extensive experience and the knowledge that they hold in their respective fields. And so upon review of the application, we are recommending the nomination of Kelly Ware Sebron for chair of the Housing Opportunity Fund Advisory Board. Kelly currently holds the Fair Housing seat, and it was very important to this nominating committee that the inaugural chair bring the rigor of that equity lens and that fair housing lens to the table in order to help us to achieve our policy and programmatic goals. So if you are familiar with Kelly's work, both in the nonprofit and public sector, you know that this is a huge win for the Housing Opportunity Fund Advisory Board and a huge win for the city of Pittsburgh. Her expertise, both professionally in her role as the fair housing representative, has demonstrated that she has the leadership capability that is necessary to incorporate those fair housing goals into the way that we conduct our business, in the way that we make our decisions. And so secondly, Derek Tillman was also nominated himself for the chairman position. And I want to be very transparent here and say that the nominating committee was somewhat reticent about the role of a developer as in the chair role. And, and talked about, is that best suited for the advisory board, given its charge to really focus on, like I said, equity and fair housing, and that being the goal. However, upon review of Mr. Tillman's application, it became very clear as to why he serves as the affordable housing for-profit developer representative on this advisory board. His personal history, the fact that he is a socially responsible developer who brings both that lived experience and that breadth of knowledge around how to do high quality affordable housing, it was very clear to us that he would serve this advisory board well in an advisory, in an officership role. And so he did an exemplary job talking about and laying bare, being very transparent about conflicts that might arise in his role as the chair. And that integrity and that forthrightness is what led us to believe that he will demonstrate the capacity that is necessary to serve as the Housing Opportunity Fund Advisory Board's vice chair. Kelly bringing the fair housing emphasis, and Derek bringing the development emphasis, both are which a confluence of the work that we do. So I'd like to extend on behalf of the Housing Opportunity Fund Nominating Committee the highest recommendation to Kelly Ware Sebron as our inaugural chair, and to Derek Tillman as our vice chair. With that, I'm going to open it up for question and response. And Jessica, I am prepared to make a formal motion today.
Thank you, Diamante. Is there any questions, comments, discussion?
Comments, Teresa Kelsmith. I'm happy to hear about the nominees, and I want to thank the committee as well, and thank Diamante for her work. I think this is a great pair, and I think that it makes me feel good to know that there's somebody with less of a interest where they'd have to abstain on votes as the chair. So I think that Kelly, and I've seen Kelly's work. I know she's amazing, and I know Derek, and I think he's amazing. So I think this is an awesome team. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Council President. Is there anybody else?
All right. Well, with that, I want to again thank the Housing Opportunity Fund Advisory Board for allowing me to serve as chair of the nominating committee. I'd like to thank Kelly and Derek for the thoughtful proposals that were put forward. I'm looking forward to working with you in this new capacity. And I'd like to make a motion to approve Kelly Ware Sebron as the inaugural chair of the advisory board. And I don't know if I need to pause to do Derek, but I'll pause there for you to issue a second.
Second, Teresa Kelsmith.
All right.
Is there, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Does anyone oppose
Aye.
or abstain? Okay, motion carries.
All right. Secondly, I'd like to advance a motion to nominate Derek Tillman as the vice chair of the Housing Opportunity Fund Advisory Board.
I'll second that nomination. It was Jerome.
Jerome seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Kelly and Derek. And thank you, Diamante and the nominating committee.
Just a quick note, some of the captions have content that isn't quite what's happening in the meeting. So I'm not sure how those captions are going to be used now and forward, but some of the content is not matching our conversation. So just whoever's technically in charge of those captions, there was quite an odd comment that popped up while we were doing our vote. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Sure, I will say, you see the captions today for the first time because the city is now filming this not just on the YouTube, but also directly onto the city channel. It's my understanding. Other than that, I can't speak towards the captions. I don't know if anyone from the city can. I heard that they are generally about 85% correct. Okay, moving on. So I put this on here because several people had expressed desire that once a chair and a vice chair was selected, that committee structures start to form, and one of the committees that people had requested was a fair housing committee. Now our new chair, Kelly Wersey Brennan, and I won't throw the rest of the meeting on you, Kelly. We will start talking next month, and you can start chairing the meetings next month. But she is the fair housing person. And Kelly, I don't know if you want to take this opportunity to set up a fair housing committee and see if there's anyone that is interested in serving, or if you would like to wait till next month. It's up to you.
I'd absolutely be interested in accepting names so that we can perhaps, see if there's a possibility of meeting in the next month, so we can really get the ball rolling on that perspective. Development waits for nobody, so I don't think we should.
So is there people that would like to volunteer for the Fair Housing Committee?
I would like.
I'd like to volunteer.
I'd like to volunteer as well.
Okay, okay, I'm hearing a lot. We try to keep the committees closely to roughly to 5. Just I will tell you the people I think that yelled out, and please correct me here. I think I saw Derek and Lena and Jerome.
Yes.
And I think there was one other. Was it Megan?
It was
Yeah,
Adrian.
Megan.
Megan and Adrian. And then Kelly will be the chair of the advisory board. So I think that seems like an appropriate number of 5 people plus the chair, who is the fair housing, unless others have concerns with that number. Was there anybody else?
I thought I
Okay.
heard Sonia.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, so I think we have the team. If I'll say those names one more time: Adrian, Jerome, Megan, Kelly, of course, is chair, Derek, and there was one other person.
Lena.
Shout it out, Lena.
It's me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so the
Jessica,
staff will.
I think there may
Go
be a
ahead.
bylaws distinction that that 5 members cannot, that the committees cannot exceed 5 members.
Okay. If that's the case, we either have to roll for an exception of the bylaws,
Okay.
or we can talk to those 6 people later and figure that out. However people want to handle that. Does anybody have suggestions?
Was thinking if there's a way to have, I think all of us are quite interested if there was like a special session where everyone could provide input or, be a part of it, that would be a way for more of us to get engaged on it. And then if some people wanted to dive deep and kind of prepare for that and follow up.
Okay, why don't Kelly and I talk about it afterwards, and we'll figure it out and get to that team of people and make an announcement next month. Okay, I don't, do we need an actual motion for that, David? Are you on?
Yeah, you do need a motion in order to form a working group or like a subcommittee. And then the way the bylaws are written, just to be clear, is that it says the advisory board chair should not serve as a committee chair. Should not is not a hard cap. It's not a shall not. So it's certainly flexible enough if Kelly wants to serve as chair of the working group. It is, however, explicit about a 5-member cap. So if you wanted to do more than 5 members in the working group, you would have to motion to like make an exception to the bylaws. So.
Okay, would anyone like to motion for the creation of the committee?
So moved. This is Sonia.
I second.
Okay, so Sonia made a motion to create the Fair Housing Committee. Diamante seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, so Kelly and I will talk over the next month. We'll figure out the, how to handle the logistics of it and make a report back. Okay, moving on. Okay, update on the Coronavirus Relief Fund rental assistance program. So as a lot of you know, and I've read in the paper, through the Coronavirus Relief Fund, which was implemented, I guess, in late December, early January through the federal government. A lot of money is coming through the U.S. Treasury for rental assistance. I will pass it over to Jeremy to describe this program more. It is not directly related to HOF. However, because our funding also touches rental assistance, we felt it was important to give a brief update on this. Jeremy.
Thanks, Jessica. So as everyone probably knows, there was a allocation for additional rental assistance that came out of the Treasury in this last stimulus bill. The county received about 27 million. The URA received just under $9 million for rental assistance. This time around, we wanted to be strategic and coordinate with the county to ensure that there is just one program that both city and county residents will access. And so, this time around, we are essentially kind of funneling this allocation to the county so that they can operate it through their existing program. So this allocation will specifically be for city residents, and we'll just go through that process. The HSP will still operate, but it's just with this allocation, we wanted to coordinate with the county.
Thank you, Jeremy. So the city will contract directly with the county, who's working with Action Housing on this endeavor. But I want to point out a couple of quick things here. So you see the 8.9, almost 9 million number for city residents. That is coming directly from the Treasury. However, the state of Pennsylvania also received a very large allocation, and it is anticipated that more money is to come through the state. Additionally, as we all know, under our new President Biden, that there's also, additional potential stimulus packages coming that may or most likely will include rental assistance. So we do see a very large, flow of funds coming for rental assistance. The program parameters and everything will be worked out, but the program is set up so that people will be able to receive the rental assistance for a series of months. So we thought it important to update the committee on that. Are there any questions?
Are you going to be, is there a possibility, I'm glad to see that the city and the county are kind of working together, because I just, you know, how you try to manage that, you know, if somebody's in Wilkinsburg and filing for assistance and thinks that they're filing at the URA, and vice versa, more likely would be somebody just knowing about the county program and not realizing that the URA or the city was doing something. So that's great to see, I think. I guess we'll see how it works. And with the additional state and federal monies, are you also talking to the county about potential collaboration?
Yes.
Great.
I have a question. What is the percentage, it's Teresa Kel-Smith, what's the percentage of funds that are going to the county to administer them?
The federal government is restricting the program income on this. I think it's, Jeremy, is it 10%?
Yeah, it's admin. Yeah.
Admin for 10%. President Kel-Smith, and I do not know the details between the county and Action, but I have heard that because Action is the one hiring a lot of the people to run the program, that a portion of that at least is going to Action.
Is this entry for this through Allegheny Links, or is it through 211? Do we know how people are accessing these funds?
Neither. So it'll be through Action Housing and DHS's system, which is, I think, like covidrelief.alleghenycounty.us. It'll be an online platform where people can apply, watch the updates on their applications. And so it's not live yet, but people can go to that website and sign up for alerts for when the program does go live.
And I'm sorry, I know it's not our program, but do we know if there's going to be an analog version? Because sometimes internet only platforms don't reach our most needy folks.
They are working with a couple of community-based organizations to try and bridge the digital divide, but I don't know the specifics on what their plan is.
Thank you.
For clarity, a resident can apply to either the HOF for rental assistance or through the county. Is that correct?
They may apply to both, but they can only use one source per, eligible cost. So they could apply for both, but they just can't use both programs for the same rent for February, for example.
Right.
If they did use the county program for a series of months and still had a need, they could then access our program for a separate series of months. Is that correct, Jeremy?
Yeah, but the Treasury program can assist up to 12 months, whereas ours is just limited to 3.
Is there a duplication of benefits concern here as we see with CDBG dollars, or is that not a concern with Treasury dollars?
Treasury hasn't put out specific duplication of benefits guidance.
Thank you.
But Diamante, we will keep doing that on our end with the providers just to document and make sure that we're not.
Jeremy, this is Mark. Do you know if they're going to avoid the pitfalls of the stuff that was tied to the state monies that were available through PHFA, where you had to get folks to get documentation in the midst of a housing crisis, and you had to get landlords to agree to wipe out back rent? And
yeah, absolutely. And with this being Treasury instead of coming through another state agency, a lot of those regulations have been relaxed. However, the big thing right now is that everyone is waiting for new guidance for the Biden administration because the guidance the last administration put out, I think on the last day of the administration, I think people are expecting new guidance before rolling out their programs. But there is some hope in there. And so, if people, if tenants applied for assistance and the landlord did not want to take it in the last program, there's nothing they could do. With this program, the Treasury is allowing them to issue the payment directly to the tenant to pay the rent or the bill if the landlord doesn't respond or cooperate.
Jeremy, could you say that website again?
Well, let me make sure it's right before I say it again. It's covidrentrelief.alleghenycounty.us. Also, Mark, is relaxed documentation requirements for income. People, if they're filing tax returns for 2020, they can use that as their income documentation for 12 months instead of trying to recertify every 3 months.
Okay, are there any other questions on this? All right, thank you, Jeremy. Moving on, another quick update. Last month, the advisory board acknowledged and accepted a line item modification for additional 2021 HOF funding coming from Councilman O'Connor. There is a project in Councilman O'Connor's district called Flats on Forward that is affirmatively furthering fair housing. It is the new construction of an affordable housing, I think 43 unit building in the heart of Squirrel Hill, right on a major busway, close to the public schools in Squirrel Hill. And when Action Housing purchased the site, they of course paid Squirrel Hill prices for that site. And it was a couple $1 million acquisition for the land. Additionally, there's a road behind the site that has needed a lot of repair as well. And really, it's an admirable project in the respect that for all the costs they have incurred, it is all 100% affordable housing project. And so what we are asking today, the Councilman O'Connor has agreed to allow $750,000 of the funding that last month was slated for HSP, but given the influx of the funding coming in for the Coronavirus Relief Fund, the fact that we'll probably be getting more from the state and then potentially more from a new federal stimulus package to move it to the rental gap program for the support of the increased costs on the Flats on Forward project. We're going to, you're going to see a presentation on the packet and the project itself. And as part of that, there will be with our new, one of the reasons we wanted to set up the Fair Housing Committee this month, and with Kelly now being the chair and being the Fair Housing seat, is because this project being in Squirrel Hill, we want to make sure that the advisory board and the Fair Housing Partnership has a chance to help weigh in on the metrics that developers should be using to track their marketing and the outcomes of their leasing from a fair housing perspective. And Action Housing has agreed to do that for this project. Next slide, Bettina. So you'll see in the column here, this additional 2021 column. If possible today, we need a motion just acknowledging that this is the revised way of using the additional HOF funding that has came. So you can see that column there in yellow. Are there any questions, or is there a motion?
Jessica, I think I have to recuse myself.
Yes, you do. I'm sorry. Lena is recusing herself as a staff member of Action Housing, and I guess you won't have to. Others won't need to recuse themselves from this line item, but the future line items, the two next projects, the Flats on Forward and the Northside properties, please start thinking if you need to recuse yourself from those, because those are rental gap.
I have a question.
Yes.
I understand that there's a lot about this new round of CARES funding that is unknown, but previously there was a specific, the guidelines for it accessing those funds were more stringent than for HOF. So I guess I have a little bit of concern that moving these funds from the one line item to the other makes it actually harder to serve some people who can't get served through CARES funding.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy can probably elaborate on this more than I can, but just based on a couple of the answers he gave to some of the other questions, what we're hearing is that it's actually more flexible. One of the biggest issues with the CARES Fund money that came from the state was the determination of income, and it was really hard for self-employed people. They seem to have fixed that going through this. Additionally, they have allocated that it could be up to 12 months. So I actually, some of us have the opposite fear that because of that, people will want to use that program, and we have some, timelines associated with not just the HOF, but the CDBG money. And we almost have the opposite fear that people will choose that program, and that will be up against some timeline commitments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I hear you. I guess we won't really know until the guidelines are out, but I'm just concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a need to do this today? Could it not be tabled until we know what the guidelines are, which will probably be out by the time we meet next month?
The need to do it today is because of the timing of the closing of Flats on Forward with its PHFA closing schedule.
Would it be possible to perhaps just move this later to the agenda so that we can hear more information on Flats on Forward as to whether or not we want to give it the additional funding and then move it? Is that, I don't know if that tracks.
Sure, I'm fine with delaying the vote and moving on to the packet so you can hear more about the project and then coming back to the vote.
Yeah, I think it's potentially exciting, and that would maybe help the conversation along.
Jessica, could I respond to Sonia's
Sure.
question or comment? Just to give you an idea, for the HSP, we have about 3.9 million still available unspent. Of that, about 1.9 million is non-CDBG money. So we have about 2 million for people who don't meet the CDBG or even the county programs, whether it's loss of income requirement or something else. We still have that available as more flexible funding.
That's good to know.
I'm a little confused about the series of events. So you're saying last month we approved this funding, but we put it in the rental gap. And now we would like to, or we put it in the the housing stabilization, and now we want to move it to the rental gap. Is that the series of events? Yeah.
Yes.
But we didn't know about this when we did that.
Yeah, how is the project going to get funded last month? Because I'm assuming that the closing's been known for more than 30 days, or am I on that assumption?
I mean, it was just really brought more to the URA's attention of some additional funding awards actually that Action Housing did get, but they received an RCAP. The RCAP announcements just came out last month. They received an RCAP award, and looks like some funding from DCED, but it's just not enough to cover the gap. And so these conversations started happening this past month.
I'd be really interested to hear the proposal as to why the funding is necessary. And I'm particularly interested to understand the housing composition of Flats on Forward and a little bit about the neighborhood context. That would be helpful to me.
Okay, let's move on to the packet then. So Sarah.
Can I actually make a suggestion? Because we delayed public comment, can we do that before we jump into the meat of the agenda? Because we normally do that in the beginning of the meetings.
Sure. I mean, we can do whatever people want. We have a very long agenda. I want to make sure we have a quorum for voting. I think that the reason we had these items before is because we do need votes on them, and I don't want to lose voting members. I also, from what people have stated, they're here to speak on legal assistance, and I thought it might be great to have that fresh in people's minds when they review legal assistance, but I am fine with either. I mean, would others like to move forward with public comment right now?
Yeah, I think we should hear public comment,
Okay.
because I don't want to take it for granted that somebody didn't want to comment on Flats on Forward. I'd like to hear their voices.
Okay, if people can send me a chat or just text me if you think you need to leave before 11 o'clock. I know of one person that does, but if you need to leave before 11, please let me know. I just want to make sure we have a quorum for all of the voting. Okay, so moving on to public comments. And I do want to remind everybody though, because we are on a timeline, city staff that's on this call recording it is going to time it the same way they time city council. And for city council, after 3 minutes, the person is muted. So please keep your comments to 3 minutes. And I will start with the first person on the list, Celeste Scott.
Okay, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Okay, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Slight echo, but we can hear
Okay.
you.
Okay, let me mute. I think I'm logged on both. Okay. So good morning. It's good to be back and to see everyone. My name is Celeste Scott. I'm the housing justice organizer for Pittsburgh United. And so the overwhelming majority of leases require that tenants waive their right to criminal proceedings against their landlord in their lease. And while landlord-tenant cases are civil suits, every single tenant in the city walks into their hearing at a disadvantage, both in terms of relationships to the law and resources. We have seen the disastrous effects of this reality long before and throughout this pandemic. This status quo disproportionately punishes Black people and poor people for the crime of being Black and poor. Today, you have the opportunity to try and start to push back against that. You can begin to level the playing field. What we are asking you to do is beyond necessary. Our current reality is unacceptable, but by approving an accessible version of the proposed legal assistance program with the urgency it demands, you can help save lives and treat people with the dignity they deserve. I hope you decide to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Celeste. Next up is Swain Uber.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for taking our comment earlier. I actually do have to hop off at 10 a.m., so it works out perfectly for me, so I appreciate that. My name is Swain Uber. I'm a housing fellow with the Community Justice Project. I know there are going to, as what Jessica said, I know quite a few of our colleagues are going to be speaking about this issue, so I'll just kind of focus on 2 points in particular. One, I'm extremely thankful, and I made this comment at the last board that I was able to attend, for the push here to start funding legal services at scale in the city of Pittsburgh. It really will make a difference, and as Celeste said, it will save lives. The eviction crisis was a crisis before COVID, and now it is just as you all know, a totally different playing field. So I'm super appreciative of that. However, the need might be larger than we think right now. So I do just want to keep in the back of people's minds the possibility of, if it seems to make sense, using demonstration funds, which is what part of the set aside in demonstration funds were originally designed for. Obviously, I think ramping up a program of this scale will take time and will come in stages. So I agree the money isn't necessary in the beginning, but there may be a point later this year that it would make sense for some additional dollars to be added to the program. And the nice thing about the demonstration dollars is they can be allocated as the board sees fit and as makes sense. So just wanted to flag that. I also wanted to point out, as I mentioned earlier, the eviction crisis was a crisis before COVID, and it will last longer than COVID. So this is going to be a program that will need funding, secure funding for more than just this year. I know Councilman O'Connor, essentially seeded or beefed up the allocation for this year, but I I do want to just put it again in the board's minds that we're going to be needing similar allocations in the coming years because frankly, yeah, people are still going to need lawyers to keep them in stable housing. So again, I appreciate you all, and yeah, thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Swain. The next registered speaker is Christine Kirby.
Good morning, everyone. This is Christine Kirby. I'm the Director of Development for Neighborhood Legal Services. First, I really want to, there's no need to, kind of pile on about the urgent need for eviction defense legal work. We're expecting a tsunami. We handled over 600 cases over the last couple of months with CARES Act funding, which has gone away, around the common defense of the eviction moratoria. Those cases were mostly continued. So as Swain had said prior, eviction crisis was a problem before COVID. It's just exacerbated now. I really want to use the majority of my time to thank Jeremy and his team for the work that they had undertaken to truly understand the issues, and thank the HOF Advisory Committee for their continued support. The guidelines proposed for the eviction prevention and foreclosure prevention landed in my desk yesterday, and we had a chance so far to look at the foreclosure prevention a little more closely, and I would like to recommend some slight terms of art modifications so that the guidelines are easily understood by the applicants and the courts. So for example, legal assistance to the eligible under Tangled Title, legal assistance to help transfer home's legal title to the current occupant's name, would be best said legal assistance to help transfer home's record title to the current occupant. The main concern that we had, also is just sort of also the way the judges who hear these cases, questions that they asked. Under the eligible applicants, they have asked that each applicant must be a homeowner or the occupant of a home in which they claim a legal interest. That's under section 4. We would change primary to sole because the Judge O'Toole always asks if we don't, whether they have any other place to live. So there's a couple words of art there, but one of the big things in many of the cases that we see gets to section 4 of the proposed regulations guidelines, that the paragraph would disqualify a lot of people who are living in the home because they are not the homeowner and they are unable to enter into a record with this
Christine, you're muted.
I think her 3 minutes elapsed.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, okay.
I can provide specific more comments about a couple of things, but the big disqualifier for many people living in long-held family homes is that they're unable to enter a tax payment plan because they're not the owner of record, and they're unable to apply for HEMAP because they're unable
Christine,
to do that as the record.
We'll follow up with you.
Yeah,
sure.
I just want to make you aware.
Okay, thank you, Christine. And looks like the next registered speaker is Aaron Erb.
Yes, hi everybody. Thanks for inviting this public comment even in a virtual space. My name is Aaron Erb. I'm the Executive Director of Just Mediation Pittsburgh. And just really glad for the chance that the URA and especially Jeremy Carter's team gave to be able to elicit feedback regarding this new legal assistance program for tenants. It's really good to be working with the legal aid organizations and with other community partners to make sure that our comprehensive system of eviction prevention is really as robust as possible. So just really briefly, Just Mediation Pittsburgh was formed in the early months of this pandemic. And like Swain said, it was a response to the public health crisis, but also to the long-standing eviction crisis nationally and locally as well. And we mediate cases between landlords and tenants to prevent eviction as much as possible and find sustainable solutions to the conflict that landlords and tenants have together. We try to do that pre-filing as much as possible to avoid that black mark of eviction on a tenant's record, and also to resolve conflict at the earliest possible point, to be able to prevent conflict from spiraling as we experience that so often in our own lives. So far we've been able to mediate over 60 cases, and we've had about a 90% success rate for parties who have agreed to mediate, which means that they've been able to find and craft their own solutions to their problems together that are as mutually satisfying as possible. People rarely leave mediation 100% satisfied, but they've had a chance to shape the outcomes in such a different way than they get in other formats. And so we've been able to really leverage the power that people have to shape their own decision-making processes. And we've been able to lean on a pool of community mediators, community trained folks to be able to actually mediate in these spaces. And that gives us a more diverse and representative pool of mediators. My comment today is mostly about the drafted program guidelines for the legal assistance program for tenants. I think they look great. And again, Jeremy's team did a great job of eliciting feedback for those. The one thing that I'd like a little more clarity on, if possible, is the coordinated entry component. It'd be great to have a system of coordinated entry that, has significant knowledge of the different players and service providers and is able to dive deep with the people calling for coordinated entry to be able to understand the specifics of their housing issue, to be able to refer them appropriately to mediation or to limited legal assistance or to a more comprehensive legal assistance. And so I'd like to see that coordinated entry role spelled out a little bit more, if possible, as the RFP is delivered. So that's my request. Thanks for your time and for your commitment to making this work for our city.
Thank you, Aaron. The next speaker is Jacob Klinger. Is Jacob here?
Jessica, I'm not seeing Jacob in the participants list right now.
Okay, thank you, Evan. Moving on to the next speaker, Megan Confer-Hammond.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Megan Confer-Hammond. I am the Executive Director of the Fair Housing Partnership of Greater Pittsburgh. I appreciate and commend the board for creating the Fair Housing Committee, and I am excited to share in what you may already know, but to really celebrate what has happened in the mere week since the inauguration in January. When I last spoke here, we were coming off of a violent attack that happened in Washington, D.C. And today, mere weeks into the new administration, we have active work towards fair housing. And so with this new administration, the fire of active discrimination by government policy is put out, but the house is still burnt up. And so while we're going to celebrate what we've accomplished in weeks, for example, and if you haven't seen it, I can provide the links, but President Biden issued an executive memo to HUD directly regarding fair housing, disparate impact, and affirmably furthering fair housing, and the need and the onus and the responsibility for us to address the systemic racism that has created not only our modern society, but that is being worsened by the pandemic at an epidemic scale. Additionally, the HUD acting secretary made an affirmative statement about the memo. And then in the following week, the HUD secretary nominee, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, had her confirmation hearing, her initial confirmation hearing, and spoke explicitly regarding support and active movement regarding fair housing in the upcoming 4 years. And so what I want to bring to the table to look at specifically today, what we can do in Pittsburgh, because the time to act is now. We have discussed the data. We know the data exists. We know the pre-existing inequities exist. And so the time to make policy changes, to make funding decisions, to start to address the problem in reality is today. And so to discuss that with some specifics is to understand, for example, in the agenda that was raised today, that Squirrel Hill is a prime example of understanding fair housing, because Squirrel Hill has a 4% Black alone population in a city with a 23.2 Black alone population based on the ACS census data. And so we must understand, even when we continue to move forward with our funding decisions, we must understand the impact of our funding decisions in order to continue to make educated, concrete, and purposeful decisions to move us into the future instead of holding us back into the past. Additionally, I will say I believe I have substantiated my fair housing expertise, and not only that, but my fair housing expertise for the city of Pittsburgh. So I certainly asked that I've been contacted before the March HOF meeting regarding the Fair Housing Committee in order to ensure as best as possible that we can collaborate for the Fair Housing Committee to be prepared to take action starting in March with the decisions that need to be made. Additionally,
Okay, I believe Megan was muted, but thank you so much, Megan. And I do want to echo Megan's statement about President Biden's memorandum that he did on fair housing. If you have not seen it, I encourage you to look at it, and I believe it is linked to the URA's website. Our next speaker is Ann Wright.
Thank you. I'd like to echo what the other speakers have said about the thanking the URA and especially Jeremy for his thoughtful approach to preparing the guidelines for the legal assistance programs. It's very much needed. There's currently 1,349 eviction hearings scheduled, which is way higher than usual. And being able to have the additional funding for the legal consultation and representation is going to make a huge difference to those folks. During the period when the plan funding from the Pennsylvania Legal Aid Network, we had the pleasure of working with NLS and sending people who needed legal assistance their way, which made an enormous difference to lots of lives. And the relative unavailability of that option since has been a real challenge. I want to highlight the Erin's point that the coordinated entry program administrators need to have substantive expertise in order to really determine which program referral is best for the applicant. And I'd also like to add that I think it's very important that there not be a requirement that the only avenue for people to approach and be able to be compensated, where the service provider is compensated as part of this program, is only through a bottleneck of a coordinated entry program administrator. I think it's important that if people approach the mediation or legal consultation or representation providers directly, that there be a smooth, expedited route whereby they can be entered into the system without having to be sent away in order to possibly get dropped. We've seen a lot of problems with other programs where that was a requirement. I would also like to encourage there to be a streamlined way for the people in the Resource Navigator network to be able to tie into this as well. Finally, I'd like to ask the HOF to hold a special meeting in February to vote on the legal assistance programming, because it is quite urgent, and people are ending up on the curb today that actually a specific one I'm thinking of yesterday that could have been easily prevented if this program had been in service in time to help her, and plenty others like her. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Anne. And I will just state that the plan is, if the advisory board is comfortable, is moving forward and voting on the draft guidelines today so that they can be voted on by the URA board next week, and the program could be operational when the eviction moratorium is over.
Fantastic.
Okay. I believe, and staff, please shout out if additional people are on the call here. I believe there was a couple people that asked to speak early this morning. Is there a Pastor Love here? Evan, do you see
I don't
him?
see Pastor Love. I think Crystal Jennings is the next on the list, and I believe she's here.
Okay, Crystal Jennings.
Sorry, just so everyone's aware, Pastor Love is blind, so sometimes he has difficulty with navigating Zoom. So I'm not sure how. Just to flag that for everyone.
Okay.
Like if
Thank
it's
you.
something that where you're like, if you're chatting, for example, he might not. Just flag him.
Okay. We can reach out to him if he would like to speak next month and make sure we have the audio set up for him. Crystal Jennings.
Yes, thank you, because I have to go in 1 minute. So this will be very quick. I want to say Happy New Year to everybody. I want to say congratulations to Kelly and Derek for your nominations. And it's nice to see everybody. I want to second everything my colleagues before me have stated. This is a tremendous crisis that we are in. We have already seen the effects of where we're lacking. And there was already a need for support for low to moderate income residents. And now we just see that, now we just see that it has increased in numbers, and it's also affecting those who have not ever used these type of services before. So I definitely would like to say, hope you guys do get a chance to, make a vote on the landlord and tenant legal assistance programming. There is so much need for helping those people that are actually in need of the services and actually preventing them to get back into the situation moving forward. We definitely want all of our residents to thrive and not fail in everything that they do. So I think as long as we kind of come together and set some ground rules and boundaries with Kelly's lead on the board and Derek backing her up, I think that you guys could succeed in that. And I'm supportive of hopefully you guys coming out of a good decision with this today. So thank you guys. I gotta go, it's 10 o'clock. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Crystal. Is Carmen Brown here? Evan, do you see her?
No, not.
Okay.
Not in this list.
And then is there anybody else that I missed that was here for public comment?
I don't think so. I think that's the list.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody who provided public comment. So now if we can go back to the agenda, let's go to agenda item F, the flats on forward development. Lena had to abstain. Are there others who would abstain? This would be, this increase would actually be funded out of 2021 funding potentially, but I would say 2020 or 2021 funding for rental gap. Does anybody need to abstain?
I need to abstain from the vote, on the project.
Okay. Anybody else?
This is Sonia. I'm going to abstain. I might have a conflict.
Okay, so Lena, Derek, and Sonia, and David, can you remind me, please, the revised conflict of interest policy from HRNA, I believe states that people can participate in discussion, they just cannot vote. Is that correct?
Yeah, they need to do what's already been done, which is disclose up front that there's a conflict. They're allowed to participate in discussion at the table at this point, but they do have to abstain from the vote.
Thank you.
I do want to I do want to share that Linda Metropolis is here to represent Action Housing, so that I won't be, I'm recusing myself, and I would rather not be part of the discussion since I'm so close to this project.
Thank you, Lena.
And so I have just a clarifying question. Just so I'm clear about, who should abstain or not. If you are receiving or if you are putting in an application for rental gap assistance program, then you should abstain from voting, but you can still participate in the discussion. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So then I will have to abstain from the vote, but thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jerome. So for the record, Jerome, Derek, Sonia, and Lena will be abstaining from the vote, and Lena is abstaining from the discussion as well, since she is a staff member of Action Housing. Okay. So next slide. Sarah Shore, staff member to URA, will walk you through the packet, and then I will talk a little bit about the fair housing emphasis. Go ahead, Sarah.
Great. Hello, everybody. As Jessica said, my name is Sarah Shore. I work in the residential and consumer lending division with Jessica and Shayna and Jeremy. I'm going to talk to you today about Flotsam Forward, as has been prefaced. The ask today is a little bit longer, so I'll move slowly and certainly make myself available for questions at the end. This project might sound familiar, probably because we've talked about it today, but also because it's come before this advisory board in 2020. Because that was a while ago, I'll do a quick overview of the project itself. This is a mixed-use development on the corner of Forward Avenue and Murray Avenue in the Squirrel Hill neighborhood. The project plans to redevelop the former Squirrel Hill Theater site, as well as the adjacent vacant parcel of land. Flotsam Forward was awarded a 2020 9% low-income housing tax credit deal from PHFA, and this project will have a total of 43 affordable units of housing. Of these 43 units, 5% are for households at or below 20% of AMI, 17 units are at or below households, are available for households at or below 50% of AMI, and the remaining 21 units will be for households at or below 60% of AMI. So just to say it one more time, all 43 units of this project will be affordable. Additionally, 25% of these units will have preference for individuals with disabilities. In addition to the housing component of the project, the first floor of this building will be 10,000 square feet of leasable retail commercial space. So just to talk about the financing for the project really quickly, the LIHTC amount is $12,250,000, and these credits are expected to be purchased at 99 cents. Other financing for the project is going to come in the form of an RCAP grant, a DCED home loan, PHFA community revitalization grant, philanthropic support, a Bridgeway Capital loan, Capital Magnet grant funds, and pending Federal Home Loan Bank money. National Equity Fund is the tax credit syndicator, and BNY Mellon is going to be the equity partner. Flotsam Forward is the second of a two-phase redevelopment strategy in Squirrel Hill, the first of which was Krause Commons, which closed in 2018 and consists of 33 units of affordable rental housing and office space for the Jewish Residential Services. At the April HOF meeting in 2020, this advisory board authorized rental gap financing in the amount of $585,000. This loan had a 40-year term and 0% interest and is in third position behind BNY Mellon and PHFA FAIR funds. As mentioned before, a deed restriction was determined to be recorded for 5 affordable units at or below 30% AMI, 17 affordable units for at or below 50% AMI, and 21 affordable units at or below 60% AMI. All of these affordable units will have an affordability term of 40 years. But since these board actions in April of 2020, Action Housing has experienced some pretty substantial cost increases, partially due to COVID, which seems to be, pretty prevalent among the developer community. But in addition to COVID, Action Housing has experienced high costs of site acquisition, buying in Squirrel Hill, an expensive neighborhood in the city, and additional cost increases due to public infrastructure repair. So as Jessica mentioned earlier, Mayburn Road is a public street that abuts the development site and is compromised due to an underground vault that holds a non-functioning heating plant. And there are pretty substantial costs with this road repair, not just due to the infrastructure, but due to some asbestos remediation and other aspects that accompany the infrastructure repair itself. So Alina and Action Housing have done a really great job fundraising to cover these expenses, but they're asking for some additional URA funding to fill the gap. I know a question earlier was why now? They have received a couple of other financing opportunities in the past month, and they have really been pushing to repair this public road that a lot of residents in that area rely on. So in order for the URA to consider filling this funding gap, there are a few things that we're asking of this advisory board today. The first of which is to increase the current rental gap program loan from $585,000 to $1,335,000. As Jessica mentioned earlier, this is an increase of $750,000. The loan terms and the affordability term of 40 years will remain intact. All units will remain affordable. The set aside will change, and I'll talk about that in a second, but so that's the first thing. The second thing is that in order to be able to increase this loan, we need to consider waiving the current RGP guidelines as they stand to allow for the loan to increase above the current threshold, the current maximum loan amount of $1,250,000. And we also need to allow for an increase in the per unit subsidy. So as it stands, this per unit subsidy is $30,000 per 50% AMI unit and $60,000 per 30% AMI unit. And with this loan increase, the new set aside would be 5 units, obviously at or below 30%, that will have $315,000 allocated to the 30% units with a total amount per 30% unit of $63,000. And for the 17 units that are at or below 50% AMI, the total for those units will be $1,020,000, which will come to $60,000 per 50% AMI unit. So that is the overview. I do want to touch on quickly the importance of this project and what it means for the city of Pittsburgh. So obviously with RGP funding, there needs to be a nonprofit applicant. While Action Housing is serving as their own nonprofit applicant, they're working with other nonprofit entities on the project, specifically Achieva, which is a nonprofit organization that provides long-term support for children and adults with disabilities. This organization offers comprehensive programs like employment services, like older adult protective services, and community supported living. Additionally, Action Housing's own management company, Supportive Housing Management Services, is going to provide services to tenants as well. And again, as it stands, the project has 25% of the units going towards households with disabilities. So that leads us into the conversation that we've had today about the Fair Housing Committee. One condition we're proposing to exceed this rental gap funding cap is that Action Housing is expected to work with the Fair Housing Partnership, as well as this new Fair Housing Committee that the advisory board has created today. And this group will be documenting marketing activities, lease-up activities, and collecting metrics that are going to track affirmatively furthering fair housing practices as they relate to this project. Another thing I do want to say is that Councilman Corey O'Connor has reallocated this money to help them fill this gap. I know you all as an advisory board are going to talk about that a little bit later, but it does indicate City Council support for this project. So just a quick recap of the asks for today, because I have said a lot in these past couple of minutes. The first thing that we're asking for is an increase to the originally approved RGP funding from $585,000 to $1,335,000. We're asking to waive the RGP guidelines to allow for a loan amount that is over the maximum, which is currently $1,250,000. And we're also asking to waive the RGP guidelines to allow for a per unit subsidy that is over the limits that the RGP guidelines currently state. So with that, I'll open it up to see if Jessica has anything to add or if Linda has anything to add if she's on, and I'm happy to take questions as well.
Sure, I have a couple things, and then I do want Linda to speak to the project here, but just real quick, if you look at your packet, thank you so much, Sarah, that was a great job. If you look at your packet on page 4, you can see the sources and uses of the project, and I do want to point out that Action Housing has really done a pretty good job, a really amazing job of fundraising. This is not a situation of a developer getting tax credits and then asking the URA to fill the remainder of the gap. But if you look at their sources, they have aggressively gone after RCAP funding from the state of Pennsylvania. They were awarded, but they were not awarded the total amount of their request, which is in part causing the gap. But you can see on these types of projects, I will say, generally speaking, the largest number is the low-income housing tax credit equity, because that's the equity that they get, through getting the credit allocation from the state and selling the credits to investors. And then you can see the URA rental gap program. In addition to the HOF funding, there is some non-HOF funding in this. But if you look at the rest of the sources, RCAP, they fundraise from the state. The PHFA Fair, they fundraise from Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency. The state home money is something that I don't think I've ever seen in a project before. They were very aggressive to get that from DCED. Additionally, Federal Home Loan Bank is pending, but they have applied to that. And then the multimodal and mixed use funds is also an additional very complex application that they are working on. So I did want to point that out, that there is a variety of funding. And then also on the fair housing, I neglected to say earlier when Megan was talking about President Biden's memo, not only is it on the URA's website, but the city and the URA has both endorsed it via some public press releases. And just to emphasize in the memo, the words affirmatively furthering fair housing were words that were introduced in the President Obama's administration, which means not only do we all support fair housing, but it is our job as the government to affirmatively further it and to actually go, out of our way to push and ensure that fair housing happens. And under our previous president, those words actually came out of the HUD vernacular, but it was really great to see that in the first week of President Biden's administration, that those words came back into the vernacular very fast. And so this is a project that really does clearly demonstrate fair housing, but we want to make sure that, and Action Housing has agreed in good faith to try to affirmatively further fair housing through agreeing to work with this advisory board and other outside organizations on that. Linda, can I pass it over to you for you to hit anything that Sarah and I missed?
Yeah, boy, the two of you did such a great job. Thank you so much. So as a consultant now with Action Housing, I continue to be somewhat involved with this project. It's been a long process. As you might remember, there were 2 other development plans for this site, both of which really had nothing to do with affordable housing. And so when the last project fell through, Action Housing said, hey, we're going to take a stab at this. We knew the acquisition price was very high, much higher than what Action Housing typically spends. But we thought in keeping with Action's commitment to trying to develop on-bus lines in communities of opportunity and to be able to create affordable housing where there's very little in supply, that it was worth the effort. And I think you can see from the pro forma that Action has done a really great job finding money under many, many different corners. And so we're happy to come back to the URA and continue what has been a relationship on this project over about 2 or 3 years. You know, some of the challenges really have been that acquisition price and certainly the Mayburn Road repair, which is just a little bit south of $1 million. We knew the city needed to help us on that. We couldn't get that money out of, you know, just a tax credit allocation. So, you know, we're also very committed, Action Housing is, to always having supportive housing. So not only our target population, people with very modest incomes, but a good percentage of the people that will live in this building and that live in Krause Commons next door come to the projects having other challenges, either in the form of intellectual or physical disability. So Action Housing is very committed to increasing the number of units that actually serve those people with even more challenges to living independently, and relationships with groups like JRS and Ajiba help us to be successful in doing that. So totally looking forward to working with the Fair Housing Partnership, making this project start hopefully within the next 2 to 3 months. So thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And, you know, and I will say if other developers were developing the site and had the street issues and some of the increased costs that Action Housing had, you know, they would either walk away from the development or they would up the rents, you know, really high to be able to cover additional debt service. And Action Housing, you know, chose to not do either and to keep the project affordable. Are there any questions or comments from the advisory board?
I have a question. I think this is a, you know, an exciting sounding project, but I do have a question about the composition of the units. I think part of what potentially makes this exciting is, you know, from the fair housing lens, is while we want all communities to be opportunity rich, cannot deny that Squirrel Hill is uniquely opportunity rich. And part of, you know, that opportunity, I believe, that's missing for low income folks is families. And so while I'm hearing a lot about other groups that we absolutely want to incorporate and take care of, if you're 3 blocks from Alderdice, is anybody like, do we have units with sizes that families can live in to send their kids 3 blocks down to Alderdice and the other really amazing schools that are in that area and everything else that Squirrel Hill has to offer?
Yeah, I think that those are very valid comments, and certainly on Action Housing's agenda, family housing is a big priority. The challenge is that this was a relatively small site. We wanted, past developers wanted to build 10-story buildings on this site. That was not Action Housing's agenda. And so where we would have hoped we could have done more 2-bedroom units, there were just challenges to the limitation of this particular site. But I certainly agree with you 100%. Also did want to mention that Action runs a program called My Place that is a very successful program, been in place 10 years, working to help young people transition from foster care or homelessness into stable, affordable housing. And we believe we'll be able to, you know, attract some of those individuals into this building as we were able to do at Krause Commons.
So is this all 1 bedrooms, or is this a combination of 1 and 2s, or?
Hey, Lena, I don't remember the exact breakdown.
Okay, I think I can answer that one.
Okay.
It's 5 2-bedroom units and the rest 1 bedroom. So 30, yeah, 37. No, 30, yeah, 37. 38. 38 1-bedroom and 5 2-bedroom.
Are there any other questions or comments? So in order for us to consider a resolution on this project, we're going to have to go back to the previous slide because that would be the source of funding to make the resolution. So Bettina, if you could go back to one more slide, I think. Yes, to this slide right here, where it is a reauthorization of the additional, once again, additional, almost surprise, HOF funding from City Council in the amount of 1.958, that this would need to be the revision in order to make this loan. Once again, I open this up for comment, or if anyone would like to make a motion.
How does this work? Because I thought City Council had designated that it was going to be spent on HSP. Has City Council voted to change that, or is that what they need to be doing? Because we weren't really able to vote. We had to accept as it came over, which was fine. It was going to things that we knew that, folks needed help. We were all happy it was going to HSP, I think. But now this has changed. So is this something that City Council needs to change legislation upon?
David, you do a better job explaining this probably than I do. Can you take a stab at explaining this?
Yeah, sure. So the way that it came over, if you look at the budget book that is posted, publicly online, it says preliminarily allocated. You guys accepted the preliminary allocation. That leaves some amount of flexibility to move things around. If it's preliminarily allocated, it's recognizing that this advisory board, I think if you asked Councilman O'Connor, he wanted to make sure that this advisory board had some amount of flexibility if they wanted. So when the question came up, he said he was fine with it. It is up to this advisory board to either accept that reallocation or reject it.
Well, that isn't what we were told when it came over. We were told we didn't have the ability, I thought. That was my impression of it. So how did we get to that kind of confusion?
So I'd like to also say, just because Councilman O'Connor says doesn't mean the law says. So I mean, even though I think he may have great intentions and he's probably done his work on it, I'd like some opinion from the law department or from legal.
Sure. I think that the board slide last month did say preliminarily allocated and the authorization was to accept. I could be wrong. I'd have to go back and look at the board slide, but I believe that's how it was presented.
Yeah, like you can see here on the slide, it says preliminarily budgeted as. That's cut and pasted right out of the legislation itself.
I'm not doubting what it says. I'm doubting the interpretation.
I think, Council President, the way that all sort of funding to the HOF works is that, you as council appropriates it, and then ultimately the advisory board, advises on how the funds ultimately should be split up, and then it goes back before council to be approved in the advisory or in the annual allocation plan legislation. This is the first time that the advisory board is receiving increased funds outside of the 10 million. So this is sort of newly tread ground and certainly up for discussion and questions from the board in determining how they want to do this. I think that's fair. And your request for a legal opinion on it is also more than fair.
So given that, does anybody want to make a motion subject to legal opinion?
I just have a quick comment. This is Adrienne Wanaha speaking. I think this is a fantastic project and philosophically definitely support it. This is just such a large increase from the first proposal that I think it's important for us as a board to discuss parameters related to significant changes in an original application.
I agree. I think that one of the things that makes this slightly easier, like perhaps an easier discussion, is that these are funds that we were gifted. So we did not originally budget for them to go into a particular place. So it's easier, in my mind at least, to move them around. But if this were a traditional increase for something that we had allotted and thought through as carefully as we had our original $10 million allotment, this would be troubling to shift the funds around in this way. So I agree, we should probably think about how to deal with dramatic increases moving forward.
I mean, I agree with that statement as well. And the URA in general, we're constantly thinking about that as well. I mean, we do have our threshold is a total of 1.25, coming out of all sources. And it is very, very rare, if ever, to exceed the threshold. But, in this particular situation, because of
I'm actually on a housing opportunity fund.
fair
meeting.
housing,
What's up?
and the increased costs of
Okay.
the development of Squirrel Hill, this would be one time where the URA would consider it. One other
Okay.
thing that we have looked
Right.
at, I will say, is the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh has selected 6 neighborhoods where their voucher rent is actually higher. And those are, 6 of the, stronger market neighborhoods, Squirrel Hill being one of those, under the logic that that they want to encourage landlords in those neighborhoods to affirmatively further fair housing and rent through the Section 8 program. And that was one thing that we had discussed at the URA when deciding to make this recommendation, is that if there ever was a time to make an administrative waiver of guidelines, that this would sort of pattern off of what the Housing Authority has done. Are there any other comments? And once again, just kind of a reminder, this is the advisory board, recommends approval of these things, and then they go to the URA board as the governing board. If someone would like to recommend approval of this via motion, or recommend something different, lesser, or with different requirements, please let me know. Go ahead.
This is Mark. Are you able to go through the existing program caps by income and what they are existing right now and what we would be waiving?
So the existing caps, right? So this gets a little tricky because the URA has other sources as well, but the existing HOF caps right now is 60,000 per unit for a 30% AMI unit, and 30,000 per unit for a 50% AMI unit. And then all URA sources together, HOF, and if home money or CDBG is in these deals, we have a per project cap of 1.25.
So it would be taking, if I understand correctly, we'd be looking at the 30% would go from 60 to 63,000 per unit. And if we approve this, it would get for the 50% or 30 to 50% AMI, it would go from 30,000 existing to 60,000. Or am I misunderstanding or doing the math wrong?
I don't have it in front of me, Sarah.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so we're doubling the income cap on the 30 to 50%. We're waiving it, or
For this particular project, yes.
Again, this is Adrienne. I'm just going to comment. I feel like there's a lot rolled in here. And the exact path to move forward isn't clear to me. Making all of these exceptions related to this one case, even with additional funds being available, just makes it feel like the discussion needs to be massaged a little bit more. And again, not that I'm not supporting the project, but I just feel like there's a lot of moving parts here.
I just wanted to, this is Linda again. I just wanted to reiterate that if we did not have to fix Mayburn Road, we would not be coming back to this committee. And I think Corey O'Connor's interest in trying to make this project move forward supported his decision to ask that money go to support this. So in essence, this project is paying for infrastructure repairs for the city of Pittsburgh, close to $1 million. So if we didn't have to do that, man, we would love it. Tell you the truth, but that's just the reality. So I absolutely agree with you. I think there needs to be a level playing field and try to stay within, established limits. This, you can see that Action has gone to every single source they could absolutely identify, but no one's going to pay for city infrastructure repairs other than some city related entity. I wish it were otherwise.
Linda, I think you and the team have been incredibly dedicated here, very smart about the project. I think that is one of the things that feels like a bit of the rub, is that there is infrastructure need here, which is slightly unusual to the other projects. So again, it's not that I'm not in support of the project or dispersing the money. I just feel that there's a lot of tentacles to this that don't fit neatly into our current protocol. And I'm not sure personally.
It feels similarly weird to us to pay for infrastructure as it does to you as a housing entity, as the HOF.
Right.
But I understand, but we understand that, I think. Sorry, Adrienne, to cut you off, but sorry.
Yeah, that is part of it, Kelly. I just think that there's so many pieces to this that it's hard to wrap my brain around it in this moment and have the most well-articulated, thoughtful response.
Well, I have a question. So if the infrastructure is not funded or paid for through these funds that we currently have, then how will it get paid for? Obviously, it's needed for the project to get done. So if it's not funded through this process or our process, then how will it be funded? Because it has to happen, right?
Yeah, Jerome, thank you. There is no other source. I mean, this is sort of coming back to the URA, and I think Jessica will second this. This was the last resort. We have tried many different avenues. And as I said, when we initially started, we thought the city was going to step in directly and put their own resources into the street, which we can't build this building unless that wall is repaired, and you can't repair that wall unless you fix the street as well. And the city is not stepping up to say they have any responsibility for that. That street has been closed. It's a hazard. There's big holes in it. It's been maybe 2 or 3 years it's been closed. So there's no other resource here.
So I think my concern, my only concern is that if we do fund it through our funds, then it kind of opens the door for the city not to do infrastructure and then having more people come through us to get that done, which I don't think is the right thing. So I'm kind of weighing those two things out, that it needs to get done, but it also may open this door for the city not to do anything moving forward and continue to leave that burden or that responsibility on, the Housing Opportunity Fund or other funds that developer may be able to get.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you, and I would wonder how the city has supported other infrastructure costs for other developers. They do not want to take this on. That's all I can tell you. So we need the URA's help, and we think that because Corey O'Connor, was willing to make funds under his disposal available to the URA, that is, creating an improvement into the Squirrel Hill neighborhood as well.
If I could just say this, so I agree with Jerome's comment. Where I would differ, I don't necessarily think it's opening a door for other developers to kind of do this sort of thing, because these funds came from another source. I would agree with that if we were moving the existing $10 million around to try to create this and, basically go over our caps, which I don't think any of us want to do. But in this case, because the funds came from another source, kind of intended to be dedicated for this project, I think that gives a little bit more latitude in this case. So I just think it's a little bit different.
Yes, I just clear. So Derek, I meant open the door for the city to not have to pay for the infrastructure, not developers. So just to be clear.
So I'm going to try to make a clunky motion, and I'm accepting wording suggestions as we go, because I too think that it's different in this case, because Councilman O'Connor gave us money that would then be going back to his district that he might have had at his disposal to put towards this project had he not previously given it to us. So I move that, again, clunky wording, because I'm trying to get that piece in so that we're not setting bad precedent, that we increase the funding allocation for the Flats on Forward project to come from the additional resources provided to the Housing Opportunity Fund from Councilman O'Connor at our previous meeting, to $750,000 and exceed the previously established caps. Does that get it done?
I think it gets it done. David, she's basically combining two motions, the motion to agree to the reallocation of the funding, and then the motion to increase the RGP. Do you agree?
Yeah, so just to be clear, I feel like I make this qualification once a meeting. I am not actually a lawyer, and I believe Kelly is actually a lawyer. So if Kelly is comfortable with that wording, I think it's clear what the intention is. I think that the discussion can be recorded in a way that sort of encapsulates what the board's concerns and feelings are around the motion. I think it's probably fine to vote it like this. You guys are also an advisory board, so it's not the final vote. It can be made very clear to the URA board as the governing board what the advisory board's concerns around these sort of increased allocations were, and sort of the special nature of it. And I understand Adrian and the rest of the board's concerns around that. I do think it's certainly well worth, like, the Fair Housing Committee, as they get working, to think about how this could not be like a special exception, but rather can the RGP guidelines be changed, sort of like what Jessica was saying, thinking about how they affirmatively further fair housing. Can you change sort of the program caps moving forward in certain neighborhoods where it makes sense? So that was a long-winded answer. I think Kelly's motion is fine.
So appreciating David's insight there, I would personally prefer that they're two separate motions.
There's
a budget question, and then there's a project question.
Yep, they can certainly be split just as easily. I think it was fine to do it the way Kelly did, but certainly cleaner and easier, I guess, maybe if we split them. That is certainly fair.
Okay, so Kelly, can you say the first half of what you said, and then we will pause and have somebody second?
Okay, so the first half, I believe, was to reallocate $750,000 from HSP to the RGP for the purposes of flats on forward from our previous allocation, from our previous receipt from Councilman O'Connor's gift.
Additional funding.
Additional funding, yes.
I'll second that.
And Knowledge seconds it. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Oh, okay. I got an eye. I'm getting some eyes. People need to unmute themselves. Okay. Anyone oppose or additional abstentions that we did not already declare?
I'm going to abstain from the budget vote.
From the budget vote. Sonia abstains from the budget vote.
And so am I. I'm just not, again, I'm still confused as to how it came over from council. And, again, my impression last month was that it was voted on and that was the way it was going to go, which was fine. And it was additional monies, but, do we or the URA board have the ability to change this up without council voting again?
So can I make a suggestion? So that motion, that's part of the motion that we make the motion to accept the amendment, do all that pending approval from the law department or from legal opinion.
Yeah, so we'll add, Kelly, are you okay
Yeah,
adding that to your motion pending law approval?
Absolutely.
So to be clear, my abstention is really about taking money from HSP. I'm just not 100% comfortable with that. So my abstention remains.
Okay.
So, but that's a great point, Sonia. If we're uncomfortable with parts of the motion, are we as a group abstaining or are we literally against the motion? I think that it's important to clarify that and to also make sure that the notes and the discussion and what the public sees is reflective of that.
If you want, I can do what city council does and call everybody by name and we can do yays or nays.
Or the other thing we could do is recess the meeting, get an opinion from the law department, come back and vote it. So everybody's comfortable. But that's just some suggestions. That's some of the things we do. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, can I ask Linda Metropolis, basically, if we were to do that and revisit this next month and put it on the URA board agenda for March instead of February, what does that delay your closing?
But can I just clarify? I meant come back today. I didn't mean come back next month. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know that legal will have an opinion that quickly.
Yes, you're probably right. You're probably right.
So next, we might be able to have an intervening meeting in a couple of weeks, but yeah, that's my only concern.
The other thing we could do, I guess, is continue to go to URA board next week, and then to Kelly's point, have a special meeting or call specific to this item after the board meeting. So at the board, I would acknowledge that the advisory board has not yet voted on this, and then we do it afterwards. And then if the advisory board were to choose not to vote, that would be up to the URA how they wanted to handle that, if they wanted to move forward or if they wanted to source it somehow differently or something like that. We could do it that way if you wanted.
It would help me actually to have an answer to the timing question before answering or kind of voting on which of those options we move forward with.
Can I respond to Jessica's comment?
Sure.
We need the approval this month, to tell you the truth. I know some of you have done LIHTC deals, and project is complex, probably 10 lawyers around the table. We need to close, we need to start construction. We're going to be losing our construction pricing if we push this off another month. So it is critical, actually, that we try to get this approved by the URA board this month.
With the current motion that says pending law approval, wouldn't that accomplish the same result?
I think it does unless it doesn't pass because we have abstentions and people who are not again opposed to this project, but opposed to shifting from HSP to this development, which is why my thing was narrow. I mean, and just that it's only if it's Councilman O'Connor's additional $2 million and we do not touch under any circumstances what we had previously allocated, but having been happy personally with what we had allocated previously, I'm okay with dabbling with the icing on the cake, if as it were, because I was already satisfied with the cake. So that's why my motion was worded somewhat narrowly to we can move his money, but nothing else. So yeah. Jessica, you're on mute.
Let's go back to Kelly's motion and just put, the clarification on there pending law approval. And let's do this again. And if there's enough people abstaining or saying no that I need to call roll, we can do that. But so Kelly's motion plus the caveat of legal approval from the city law department, all those in favor? Shout it out, unmute yourselves.
Aye.
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 Okay, I'm hearing, I think,
Let me call you right back.
more than half of the ayes.
So let me just say, I apologize. I was talking to Councilman O'Connor. He did talk to the law department, so I'm okay.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, President Kel Smith. That's great.
Thank you.
It's good to have power.
So does that satisfy? I know Sonia said she was still going to abstain, but the others that were worried about the if city council
Look,
had to reapprove.
If this was, to Kelly's point, if it was the core allocation, I'd, be fighting tooth and nail to stop it, because there's going to be a need for COVID relief funding above and beyond what we're going to see from the state and what we're going to see with the collaboration with the city and the county and what the feds are going to kick in. That this crisis is hugely much deeper than I think people are realizing maybe. But it's also money that it came from city council. In effect, it could go back in some fashion or form. So with that 750,000, while I'm personally opposed to pulling it out of the HSP, it's kind of a moot point in that it could be taken back out of the Housing Opportunity Fund. And if we can get fair housing pieces that come into place in neighborhoods where we typically don't see affordable housing, that's great. I really also hate setting a precedent of waiving these guidelines. And it's not just waiving it for a little bit, it's kind of demolishing the guidelines when we're going from $30,000 to $60,000 per unit. And that's a precedent that we're going to set, and it's going to be hard to say no to that as we go forward with other projects that come in. And we're all, the cost of this is $500,000 per unit. That's but with that, I also understand the practical reality is that it's going to happen anyways. We should vote to get the affordable housing and get deeds on the property that are, well, I guess we already have some of that stuff, but we should just move forward and not keep making the project jump through hoops, because I think it's going to happen with or without the Housing Opportunity Fund Board.
Thank you, Mark, for those comments. So just for the record, in terms of we got the ayes. In terms of abstaining and declining, Sonia abstains. Does anyone else abstain or decline?
I
abstain.
Derek.
Oh, right. The people that originally said they had to abstain is Derek, Lena, Jerome, and Sonia needed to abstain anyhow. So I think that still leaves enough active members voting for the motion to carry.
So not to prolong this, but that abstention was for the rental gap program. This is not that. So
Good
this
point.
is it.
There's two parts of this. So that was the first half. Okay. So does anybody besides, thank you, Sonia. Does anybody besides Sonia abstain to the first half? Which is the moving of line items. Lena.
I think I should. I think they're kind of
Okay.
interconnected.
Okay, Derek
Yeah, and I still need to abstain as
and
well.
Jerome. Okay. So that was part A. And then part B is the actual approval of the loan increase with the per unit waivers.
Don't we need to finish that vote or acknowledge that it's finished?
I think it is finished. Did I miss a portion
No,
of
I
it?
just wanted some
Okay.
acknowledgement.
So acknowledge it passed. Part B is the increase of the loan with the per unit waiver of guidelines and the total amount waiver of guidelines. All those in favor? Or actually, did somebody, I guess someone needs to second Kelly's motion.
Second it.
Knowledge seconds. All those in favor?
I'm sorry, Jessica, this is Victoria. Did Kelly restate the second motion? I don't have a record of what that second motion is.
Kelly, can you please restate the second
Yeah,
portion?
yes, the second portion was to increase the per project and per unit caps. I don't know if I need specific numbers, but to what is necessary to complete the project with
Okay.
that additional 750.
So to increase the project by 750,000 and the waiver of administrative guidelines to exceed the per unit and project cap.
Yes.
And knowledge seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 We've already had the four people that need to abstain from the rental. Are there any other abstentions or declines? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. And everybody, I acknowledge it is 5 minutes before 11. We still have, you know, some agenda. If you need to leave, it is okay. But I encourage people to stay on for another 30 minutes. The next item is the north side properties. Brett, please keep the remarks relatively short given the time.
Sure. All right. So good morning, everyone. Today I'm presenting the Calbride Place development. It's also known as Northside Residences Phase 4. Just to give some quick background, there have been to date numerous phases with Northside Properties R&S LLC that have involved substantial renovations to revive obsolete properties to ensure long-term affordability in the neighborhoods. So phase 1 consisted of 75 units. That's been completed. Phase 2 consisted of 122 units. Construction for phase 2 is expected to be completed sometime this spring. And then phase 3 consists of 68 scattered site units, and that is anticipated to close by December 2021. So this project, however, is located at the intersection of California Avenue and Kirkbride Street in the California Kirkbride neighborhood. The development itself includes the new construction of 42 general occupancy units. Those would be contained within a 30-unit apartment building and then 6 new duplexes. All 42 units would be subject to a 20-year HUD project-based Section 8 HAP contract. So therefore, these units would all be available at various income levels. Specifically, 5 units would be affordable at or below 30% AMI, 20 units at or below 50% AMI, and then 17 units at or below 60% AMI. So we're here today because they've requested URA financing in the form of a $400,000 UPIF loan that was approved at the loan review committee yesterday. But there's also a $450,000 rental gap program loan. That'd be 3% of a 35-year term. The RGP loan would occupy third lien position. It'd be repaid with 50% annual cash flow or the minimum annual $1,000 payment as required by the program guidelines for the RGP. So deed restrictions would be recorded on the 5 units at or below 30% AMI and the 20 units at or below 50% AMI for a period of 40 years. So the external financing is a $3 million PHFA first mortgage loan. There's a reservation of 29% tax credits in the amount of about $1.2 million. Dollar Bank would provide an equity bridge loan for approximately $9.6 million. And the total development cost is just north of about $15.6 million. So Northside Properties 4 LLC is the ownership entity, and Northside Properties R&S LLC is the managing member. Sarah Mystic and Bob Mystic are the principals. Ralph A. Falbo Inc. is the development consultant, and Urban Strategies Inc. is the nonprofit applicant as required by the RGP application. So Urban Strategies Inc., however, will also provide services to residents, including some specialized case management, financial literacy workshops, as well as some employment readiness workshops with other programs and activities. So lastly, regarding the timeline of the development, they do anticipate a closing in July 2021 and construction to conclude sometime in September of 2022. So just want to keep it a little brief there. So I'd like to introduce Sarah Mystic and Bob Mystic with both Northside Properties R&S LLC and Mystic Construction, as well as Michael Polite with Ralph A. Falbo Incorporated. They're here on behalf of the development team really to just help answer any questions you may have on this project. Thanks.
Does anybody have any questions for the development team? If not, would someone like to make a motion?
I would love to make a motion, Jessica, but I do not have today's documents in front of me.
Sure. So if I were Adrian, the motion would be to enter into a rental gap program loan in the amount of $450,000 for the new construction of 42 units in the north side. The commitment will expire on August 11th, 2021. For the minutes, Victoria, please note that the commitment for flats on forward will also expire on August 11th, 2021.
Is that a motion?
That's a I mean, Adrian, is that a motion?
I would like to recommend the approval of a rental gap program loan in the amount of $450,000 for the new construction of 42 units for the Calbride Place Northside Properties Residences Phase 4. The commitment will expire on August 11th, 2021.
Second.
Was that Teresa Kell-Smith?
The Kell-Smith second. Yeah.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm abstaining.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm abstaining. That's right. Sorry.
Okay, so Sonia, Lena, Derek, Jerome, I mean, this is the same line item as before, so I assume you're all abstaining.
Yes.
Okay. Any other abstentions or declines? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. And thank you to the development team.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, you received the guidelines via email a couple days ago, and I will pass this over to Jeremy to walk you through them.
Thank you. Bettina, can you go to the next slide? Okay, so I'm going to try to be brief here. You know, we did do a series of roundtable discussions in the past month or so to ensure we got a diverse perspective of what groups and communities thought we needed to include in this legal assistance program. So we met with tenant advocates, mediation, neighborhood legal advocates, bar association, and advisory board members. We took all of those meetings, next slide please, and kind of synthesized the common themes that we heard from everyone to try to design what the legal assistance program should look like based on what we were hearing. You know, primary reasons, the most common reasons for legal assistance we heard was obviously evictions due to failure to pay your rent, habitability issues, as well as security deposit return issues. So we also heard that in order for this to be effective, we need all of the different legal assistance services and components to work with each other and not be siloed. Building on that, we also heard and agree that there also needs to be resources incorporated in these programs. So we will also talk about that when we go through the individual programs. So first is for the homeowner legal assistance program. We will have Tangle Title, which we currently have, but it's housed within the HAP program. We're essentially going to move that into this new legal assistance program. And that will be to help get resident or the homeowners' deeds into their names. The second service we'll offer for homeowners is foreclosure prevention, which will include repayment plans, special forbearance, and mortgage modifications or refinancing to help avoid foreclosure and avoid going to Act 91 and HEMAP in the foreclosure process. Next slide. So for tenants, we will have 3 different legal services. First, and these are intended to kind of be the different levels of legal assistance needed. So mediation will be the first level of service where they will try to mediate the issue between the landlord and tenant through a mediation agreement, and that agreement will be reviewed by an attorney to ensure that no one's rights are being violated and that the mediation is legal and fair. Those services will be geared towards people that are being evicted for non-payment of rent, implied warranty of habitability issues, and the security deposit returns. If someone needs a little bit more or different legal assistance, we will also offer limited legal consultation, which will be over the phone legal advice for, again, evictions of non-payment of rent or habitability issues and security deposit. This is typically short, 15-minute, one-time legal consultation from an attorney. If someone needs a little bit more representation through the eviction process, full legal representation through that process will also be available, although we are still trying to figure out what the correct ratio will be. But what we heard in our roundtable meetings is that there is a desire for expanded services in mediation and limited legal, but full legal representation will be available as well only for eviction cases with non-payment of rent. Tying it all together, we will also have coordinated entry provider who will need to have expertise and experience in triaging these calls to really identify what the right level of service is in order to make that appropriate referral to whoever the agencies will be that will be administering these services. And that coordinated entry will provide those services and referrals for both homeowners and tenants. It is possible that a provider could be coordinated entry provider and provide one of these other services. So there will be 2 different RFPs that we will be releasing on February 12th. One will be for the tenant services, the mediation, limited legal, full representation, as well as coordinated entry. We will also have the RFP for homeowners, so that will be for the Tangle Title and foreclosure prevention. And again, legal or organizations can apply for any of these, including coordinated entry. There was public comment earlier about what coordinated entry really is, and so I just want to take a quick minute to expand on that. Like I said, they will need experience in being able to triage those calls, and we are currently working on our side on what the process will look like if someone ends up going straight to mediation. we want to make a process simple and easy to navigate. And so we are just trying to work through what that process looks like to make sure that it's easy for the resident seeking assistance. We will release the RFP February 12th. We'll open it for at least 2 weeks. And we do plan to hold a pre-proposal meeting to answer any questions that applicants may have before submitting their application, with the hopes of awarding sometime by March and have services running sometime mid to late March, hopefully. I think that's the last slide for legal. Any questions?
Hi. So I do have a couple of questions. The first is on the coordinated entry. It looked like it said, and again, I'm kind of toggling between the two documents, that our requirements were going to be 50% of AMI. I can't seem to locate our final allocation plan for 2021, but I thought we had some legal services going up to 80%, or am I incorrect on that?
I believe it's 50% for renters and 80% for homeowners. Vatina, is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. So it aligns with the HSP program guidelines.
So, okay, so the coordinated entry, that's for both of them, would have the 50% for this and 80% for that. Okay,
Yes.
okay. I didn't get that from me. Okay, so then the second question is about limited legal representation. And in our conversation, we had talked about a little bit how it's absolutely beneficial for people to be able to call and get their legal rights, but sometimes a lawyer can do a one-off representation of drafting a letter that gets much more traction than perhaps if a tenant just says, hey, well, I talked to a lawyer and they said, versus if that call is made or that letter is drafted. And I didn't see that kind of one-off flash in the pan representation as part of what it looked like was included in the RFP. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, we agree, Kelly. We're operating under that same understanding as well. We will need to just make that more clear when the RFP goes out of what exactly is eligible under those services. But yes, it won't just be limited to, phone consults. It can be letters. It can be, essentially not fully representing them in an eviction case and being limited and time bound.
Okay. No, I mean, I thought that was our, where we had arrived, but we're very literal as lawyers. And I was like, if it's not on there, and they'll say, well, that's not it. We don't do that. And then to that same kind of literal interpretation of the bullets question, my last one is on habitability. So it says, it seems to read as though when a habitability issue pops up, that it kind of poofs because it's no longer just about non-payment of rent. And I just, that if that's how we're intending to write it, I find that to be concerning because in 90% of my cases that I ever had, regardless of how they showed up to the door, there was a habitability issue that they had underlying in their case because just our housing stock is not.
Yeah. So that's why we actually changed the wording recently from just habitability to implied warranty of habitability to refine that to mean that it's only limited to that implied warranty that the landlord is legally obligated to maintain habitability, not just any habitability concerns.
I think, sorry, I'm looking under. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out.
Could I ask a quick question while we're talking about the coordinated entry? Why is it just an eviction that's related to non-payment of rent? Shouldn't it be covering evictions for other reasons?
Jessica?
End of lease term, breaches of the lease. There's some other things that we might want to put in there.
So we
instead of
have
limiting.
discussed this at length at the URA, Financial hardship, is something that we can help with through legal prevention program, and then referring them to, the county's program or HSP for funding to help remedy that. And then habitability is also, an issue for the government, and wanting to help defend people over habitability issues, mold, etc. When it comes to lease issues itself, whether it be a violation of, having something in your unit you're not supposed to have, if you have a cat when you're not supposed to have a cat, like those are things that are outside the realm of the URA as a redevelopment authority. And so that's why it was decided that financial and habitability are the things that are within our realm.
Yeah, I guess, but I think that, what you're going to find is that, that this stuff is going to run together. I'm not a lawyer. I haven't represented folks. I know from days of working with the Northside Tenant Landlord Project years ago that there was always some other reason when you're down trying to help the tenant in front of the magistrate to not get evicted, that there was some other stuff that was underlying this, but it was the way that the case got made that, it just really, if I just worry that we're going to not be really effective with this if we sort of handcuff at the beginning. And I'd rather have some more flexibility in these guidelines to allow the most effective way that the folks that are providing the legal assistance can help people stay in the house and not get sort of jerked around to get evicted on some other things besides the non-payment of rent. That you can always gin up another reason to put somebody out if you're trying to do that.
Yeah, it's really that non-payment of rent and habitability, often are a little bit clearer cut. The URA does not want to be, in a position of being, the person to determine rightfulness or wrongfulness in some of these other situations. And our funding needs to be very clear cut that it's helping for financial reasons or habitability reasons.
And additionally, when we met with all of these groups, we had about 30 different meetings to draft these guidelines. And what we heard time and time again, the three most common issues was non-payment of rent, habitability, and security deposit returns. And so when thinking about designing a pilot program, we have to be limiting to see if this will even work before we expand on it. And so we decided to go with the three most common requested legal assistance issues.
But again, and Jessica, when you're saying that we at the URA, this is really, we're contracting with somebody to provide a service to help people stay in affordable housing and not get kicked out. Is it possible to put some language in about end of lease term, something along that, to get some additional flexibility here?
I would have to see the wording of what you're asking.
Can we also, sorry.
No, go ahead, Kelly.
I was just gonna say, if not, but I'm thinking about the non-payment of rent issue as well, and thinking of perhaps about some language where if non-payment of rent was ever raised, at least, so that we can maybe flesh out those, we're saying it's about your cat today because you caught up on your rent yesterday. So it's really, it truly is a non-payment issue sometimes, but we came up with, some subterfuge because that tends to happen. Like if non-payment of rent was an issue in, I get what you're saying in terms of what is the true, what is the URA scope, and it is habitability and non-payment perhaps, but it also lets a lot slide. If we can broaden it, then I think that would get to maybe the root cause or address both. We could help you. We helped you get pay your rent last month, but now today your end of lease term, but technically it's end of lease, but it's really the same kind of issue. As a thought.
So I do have some questions. I have a number of questions related to the mediation portion of the agreements. So first, let me, just full disclosure, I am a board member of Just Mediation Pittsburgh. So just so I disclose that. So my concern is one, that we're offering mediation services to tenants, but not the homeowners. I think that mediation for homeowners can be a really great benefit for them. I'm also having some difficulty around, so mediation is a non-biased, non-partial process. And so when you look at, like, where it describes the mediation services, and it says that the agreement will be drafted, that the drafting of a mediation agreement on the behalf of the tenant. That doesn't say that I'm biased if I'm working to create an agreement for the tenant. The agreement should be all parties in the room. The agreement should be drafted for everyone and not focused on just the tenant. And that just could be wording, but if I was a person looking at this and wanting to be part of mediation, I would probably think that this is, if I was a landlord, that this process is more about getting the tenant, good, and not myself. I also have some questions around cultural competency, as it looks at mediators and, who will be administering this. I think that limiting the issues limits the ability to come to an agreement, right? Because we know in mediation that people start out with, it's this, but it's not that, it's something else. And when you start to have that conversation, it could lead to one of these three things, and it could lead to something else. And if it leads to something else, then does the mediation stop? If you find out that it is not one of these three things. So, I am a very passionate person when it comes to mediation, because that is my other life. And so when I see mediation being kind of put into a box, that concerns me, because mediation is a process that can allow people to really work through some issues, and to put limits on it really does not allow for the process to really work in the way that it should. My other big concern is having an attorney look at the agreement after the parties form the agreement. To me, disvalues the process, right? Because it can also start up other issues. If, in my opinion, when people sit down at the table and they agree that this is the agreement that I am happy with and I can live with and walk away, that we should not have anyone else looking at that agreement. It can cause more, in my experience, is that causes more problems than it does help. So I do have a lot of concerns around this whole mediation, especially when you start talking about mediation in the African American community and minority communities. How are mediators equipped to do that, right? And so I just have a lot of concerns as it relates to the mediation services.
That's enough. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Derek.
I was just going to add a few comments to that. Clearly this program is necessary, but I want to make sure we're looking at it through a balanced lens. And I want to just try to understand the coordinated entry a little bit more. If someone's behind on rent, 6 months and they get legal defense, okay, that's one thing, but or is this being paired with rental assistance? Because that may stay the eviction temporarily, but the person's still behind. And what we don't want to do is be putting landlords out of business at the same time, because that really just exacerbates our affordable housing crisis. So that coordinated entry could kind of speak to the tenants' issues, but also like simultaneously, alleviating the concern, which may be, okay, you need some assistance with back rent. So I just want to make sure that is that the intent with the coordinated entry piece, and then connected to that mediation. I think mediation, to Jerome's point, will play a critical role in this. And is that really intended to, when a person comes in, really determine if they really need, full legal support or if mediation would be a better option. And I do think mediation allows for more creative solutions, even if it isn't a back rent issue or a security deposit issue. Mediation could speak to some other things, whereas maybe if you just go straight, full out legal defense, it's more limited. So just trying to, make sure we're looking at this from a balanced approach, but also that coordinated entry can really help to, bridge the gap.
Yes, Derek, that is the intent of coordinated entry, but it doesn't necessarily have to live with coordinated entry only. So if someone goes to mediation, the intent here is that they will link them to rental assistance if that is part of the problem, but also the landlords, if habitability is part of the issue, we will then refer them to the URA Small Landlord Fund so that they can take care of the habitability issues, and it's not just a tenant resource. So it very much can happen in coordinated entry, but it doesn't, that's not the only place that those referrals will happen.
So that's, I had a couple of follow-up coordinated entry questions. One about landlords and the opportunity for landlords to reach out for mediation or to say, hey, I'm not getting paid. Can you connect, can you reach out to my tenant and get this taken care of as well, so that it funnels both ways as a win-win. And then my second was on the income documentation. We've relaxed some of those on our other programs, but it looks like they're still in place for the legal aid services in terms of the pay stubs within the certain period of time, et cetera. I was wondering if we could sync that up to the more relaxed level, because we relax them in other areas for a reason, I would imagine.
So we haven't relaxed the requirement to have income documented for any of the programs, but we've relaxed how they can do that. So the same would apply to this. The income documentation is still required, but there are flexibilities on how to do that, including self-certification.
I have a comment on the coordinated entry, just to stress one more point, and I believe it's reiterating one of the public commenters. We have this centralized intake system for some of our other HOF programs, and it's proven challenging and proven to be difficult to navigate in some situations for people that we're trying to help. So I just want to stress the importance of having highly skilled and trained people in this coordinated entry program so that we make sure we're actually getting the results we expect.
Correct. The coordinated entry provider must have experience with legal assistance to be able to triage the calls.
It sounds like there's a lot of, and again, we just seeing this kind of for the first time yesterday. I know that the staff has been working on this, but I'm kind of thinking that there's a lot of questions about the rental piece on the legal assistance, and is it going to kill us to take some more time to go back through these guidelines again? And just being sure, I want to make sure that the folks that are going to wind up providing these services that are representing clients, with the full legal representation, if they're only in court to help the tenant with back payment and, somehow the rent gets caught up and, then they get evicted anyway for some other reason, maybe we need to be looking at dual causes or something like that. I think that I just have a lot, I think this is great that we're doing it. I've, been an advocate for more money for this kind of program, but I'd hate to get it wrong coming out of the gate and then not have it work. And that's my concern. And should we table this for some more input? I know that you guys have done a lot of work on this. I'm not knocking that. I just, seeing this for the first time, there's just some questions that are pretty big that are popping up, but I think if we took a little bit more time, we could get this, maybe improve it.
So the answer, can you table? Yes. What the reason this is here this month and tentatively on the agenda for next week's URA board to approve the final guidelines is the moratorium. The eviction moratorium is lifted March 31st, and we do need to do an RFP once the guidelines are approved. So to give us time to get someone in place or a couple of firms in place by March 31st, that was the reason it is here in front of you today. I do acknowledge the advisory board got this about 2 days ago, but I think there might be a slide that lists all the groups that me and the staff have talked to, and that was really what the delay was, is that they wanted to bring in, yeah, here you go. They wanted to bring in all these groups and opinions to craft it. And so that's what they have been working on the last month. But with that said, I'm open to whatever the advisory board wants to do.
I actually appreciate all the knowledge and all the concerns and comments. I really listen to Jerome and Mark a lot and hear some of the things they say, but I'm really concerned that there are people waiting for this, and I just don't want to do anything to jeopardize people needing help. Is there a way that maybe we could approve it pending that we see the RFP prior to its being issued?
Sure, we can definitely send the RFP prior to its being issued. And Jeremy, you would need to speak to this better than me, but Jerome's comments about mediation and if it could be part of the homeowner guidelines. I mean, could we consider adding a potential portion to of mediation to the homeowner guidelines and just making the resolution contingent on that?
I don't see why we couldn't look into that. The reason we didn't is when we talked with Just Mediation, homeowners never came up. And I'm a little unclear what the mediation, who the other parties would be in that mediation, but we can definitely touch base with them and see if that makes sense, if we can add that to the homeowner section.
That's actually a good point. Jerome, how does that work? Is the mediation with the mortgage company? Like, do they come to the mediation table?
So there have been, in the past, there has been mediations between mortgage companies and homeowners. I'm also thinking that it is good around the, with Tangle Title stuff, right? Because we literally try to use mediation here at OBB to handle some of our Tangle Title issues. I think it's good for that. As I said, a lot of times it is not the issue that is put up in front. It is these other issues that are really, the crux of the conflict that, people don't realize until they get to the table. So I think with, homeowners, it is, between them and their mortgage company. It could be Tangle Title issues, it could be a number of different areas that mediation can help in. So that's why I'm saying it should be an option. Some homeowners choose it, some don't. And it's sometimes based on their mortgage company. Most mortgage companies should have mediation as part of their service, so to speak, when they are filing for oh wow, the word was just like right on the tip of my tongue. So foreclosure. So in foreclosure prevention, mediation is also a service that most mortgage companies provide before they get to any other legal service. So it is. I'm just saying that it's a possibility that mediation can help before people get to court as it relates to homeowners.
Thank you. I mean, so that could be a possibility if someone wanted to make a motion to approve it contingent upon adding mediation as an eligible use of funding to the homeowner guidelines. We could handle it that way, add that language, get it back to the advisory board via email in the next week or so. But if we do want to be prepared for the March 31st moratorium, we do need to get the final guidelines to the URA board next week.
Just one additional comment. I believe there was a commitment earlier to follow up with some comments that Christine Kirby was making. I just want to make sure that we do that as well.
Yeah, I meant that I would follow up with her directly after the meeting because she
Yeah,
sent me an email of questions that I'll follow up with.
Mhm.
But she also just sent me a message that I wanted to bring up before that motion is entertained, that if we're entertaining mediation with homeowners, the courts have to be involved in that process. And I would just want to touch base with Just Mediation to ensure that their mediators are trained in that process.
Would we be
Okay.
able to, sorry.
So, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so pending the board, so we could do, I just want to process question. We approve guidelines, they go to the URA board next week, and then we would have the opportunity to review the RFP prior to it going out based on those guidelines?
Yeah, the tentative plan was February 12th RFP day, which is the day after the board meeting, but we can certainly push that to ensure that there's time for the advisory board to review the RFP.
If we could push that maybe a week to get into the weeds a little bit with the RFP, I would appreciate that. And then I think that would be able to address any of these smaller issues.
Well, I'm not sure that's going to get to the, exclusive non-payment of rent. Maybe we amend the guidelines, at least as far as it's concerning the services for tenants in the coordinated entry and in the mediation and in the legal, limited and full legal representation, that we maybe look at a dual cause, that it's non-payment of rent and other causes or something. If it's just non-payment of rent, it is not going to work.
No, absolutely. I would make that motion to amend to either dual causes or recent non-payment of rent as well. So if you're caught up today and they file tomorrow, it would technically not be a dual cause, right? So I would make that that motion or support that motion, as well as adding mediation to the homeowners program, which also, especially when it comes to Tangle Title, when you're trying to get like two sisters to get one lives there and one doesn't, that would be a prime piece for mediation to get one to transfer amongst family, which I hadn't even necessarily thought of until Jerome mentioned, like, oh yeah, this is family issues. That is, you don't need to show up with a lawyer. That makes people mad. Go to mediation and get that right. So I would.
If that's a motion, I'll second it.
So yeah, so I move that we add dual causes where there is non-payment of rent or has been recent non-payment of rent as causes for eviction, and to add mediation as a permissible use for the homeownership Tangle Title and or foreclosure prevention program to go to the URA board for vote on those guidelines.
Okay, so Kelly made a motion, and Mark, did you second?
Yes.
And Mark seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody oppose or abstain? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, everybody. I think that was the last voting item on the agenda. I know we are well over time, so I will fly through these remaining slides. Jeremy and I will. Next slide. These are just our programmatic expenditures. We're still working on a format. I know last month Mark asked for the maps to be a little bit less busy. So this month we have the program separate, but we're still perfecting format. But here's the down payment closing costs. You can see all the green throughout the city and 182 households served. 67% of our funding through, I think, 2020 has been committed. Next slide. Homeowner assistance program. Here are our blue dots throughout the entire city. 239 households served or being served right now. Next slide. And then on the development side, the rental gap and the for sale. And we are still looking for ways to diversify that geographically. Next slide. And then this, once again, is the money through 2020. It does not have 2021 money on here, but you can see what has been committed and closed, and that most of the line items are well on their way to being committed. The 4.5 here on rental gap, I should mention that the North Side project you saw today is the first of the tax credit deals. I had talked to the advisory board a few months ago about the 4.5 really needs to go to fill the commitments on the tax credit side, and that's the first one that'll be coming out of that pot of money. And then you can see, as Jeremy mentioned earlier today, we do have 2.9, almost 3 million remaining in HSP. Next slide. And then the program expenditures and impacts, you can see the households served. So, we've talked in the past about demonstration, including the shelter, but if you take that out, we are still at about 2,500 households served if you add those 3 columns up. And just a couple of general housing announcements. Jeremy, you want to take this?
Yep, very quickly, just wanted to show you additional HSP funding awards that we will be bringing to the URA board meeting next week. None of this is HOF funding. And then a quick update, the Community Engagement Ambassador Service, we are going to extend it for another 3 months going into April. This will just ensure that there's not a lapse of coverage as the county program gets up and running. And I do want to thank Adrienne for her leadership of the CEA program. We had some hiccups, but she has been a really great steward for that service.
And the next advisory board is March 4th at 9 a.m. Is there any other questions or comments that the advisory board has?
I know we're at the very end of a very long meeting, but I think today's conversation demonstrates the need for us as a board to get materials early, process materials early, and potentially submit questions and concerns prior to the meeting, so that some of the more administrative items can be talked about. We can get some clarity before we're coming together in these settings with, just a wealth of questions. And I know that everybody's busy, but just having a little bit more information ahead of time, even if that's a report back from board members to conversations that they had with the URA, like this legal set of conversations. There are several board members of the HOF that participated, and maybe there's some way that we can get some notes or some updates so that we're really ready to be pointed, targeted, and make intelligent decisions, and also being incredibly mindful of some of these tight timelines.
Great, thank you, Adrienne. We will do whatever we can to get things to the advisory board earlier.
And I just want to mention that I just see that we're putting up this, 2-1 to call 211 again. And I just want to make sure that we're getting some input from them, some feedback, some data from them, because I hear from a lot of people that call here and they're not necessarily getting the help. I see our numbers and I understand what we're saying, but I think that there's a combination of things that people are calling for. So I'd like to know specifically how many people are calling and how many people were helped.
Okay, Jeremy, let's work on getting the data to the advisory board.
Yep, no problem.
Anything else? All right, can someone make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Derek.
Second.
Kelly seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, anyone opposed? All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for staying.